Everybody is going to get to know each other in the pot. That I'm serious about. I'm up the night before, pressing garlic. Do best.
So now finally on to the third phase of the book, where we're looking at chapter 13, where we're comparing South Africa to the US. Arguably, South Africa has been the most extreme example of inequalitarian pluralism, well, basically in the world. So it's important to note how the population is divided by basically two groups, whites and black.
For a long time, it's had a large white population. And there are two types of white people there in general. There's the English South Africans, and then there's the Afrikaners. So the English South Africans, they're English, and they speak with a South African accent, which is kind of it's different from an English accent, but it's pretty unique. And Afrikaners, they're the descendants of the Dutch settlers who first arrived in South Africa, and they have a really like Dutch German-esque sounding accent, and they're unique as well. And then among the African people, there's many different tribes, I guess, or groups of Africans. There's Zulus and Sutus and Setswanas and Xhosas and Vendas and others. Like, there's so many different languages in South Africa, and you'll see that a lot. And then there's two other groups of people. There's Indians. Back in the day, many Indians came to the Durban area in the south coast of South Africa, and many of them live down there. And then there's also the colored people, who are the descendants of when the whites first came there. They intermarried with a lot of the Africans, and so they produced this mixed race people called the coloreds.
9% of the population is white, and there are two types of white people that live in Africa. Afrikaners.
Afrikaners, the people who ran South Africa during the brutal apartheid era, now say the rules are rigged against them. Many Afrikaners believe their culture and language are under threat.
It's almost like you're always walking around with a target on your back.
Our white minority, which once ruled the roost, now fears for its future.
27 years since the abolition of apartheid in South Africa, and yet even today there still exist communities of whites who refuse to mix with blacks. It is the case in the small city of Orania. There, the only language spoken is Afrikaans, the tongue of the first Dutch settlers. In Oriana's schools, students are taught a revisited version of history, and while many residents settled here to avoid any sort of ethnic diversity, while others appear to have fled the violence and new racial tensions of present-day South Africa.
We've been murdered for some time now. They are coming to take the land as well. And I think that's very hard to conclude that there's not a racist motive.
Shoot to kill!
This is hate. This is political hate.
You must say enough is enough. We are taking the future into our own hands.
You can build a prison around your house, but at some point you have to leave that prison and go out and farm. And that's where they get you. My one neighbor, Hannes Kitching, and his wife, they were murdered about 6 months ago. Then there's Miss Simpson, Nikki Simpson. She was tortured, drilled through her knees and feet. Then there's Piet Higu, also a neighbor not far from here. He was shot. Karel Hall was shot. So in the last 10, 20 years in this area, I can name 20, 30 attacks, murders on farmers.
These are white people with former Dutch ancestry and the English, which are, well, English. The remaining portion of the population is non-white, consisting of three major groups. The first being coloreds, which are a racially mixed group.
I think it would be very fissin and weird if I had to claim being black. So I don't think colored people are black. We're not white. But I don't think those are the two that we need to judge ourselves against.
Personally, I am a black South African. I am a colored South African. So I think you can be both. I am both.
I think the question is, are colored people African? And I definitely think we are.
This is Westbury, a predominantly coloured neighbourhood in Johannesburg.
Come and join us here in Westbury Life,
where people of mixed heritage live. People like me. It's a community caught in the crossfire between drugs and gangs.
When you smoke this, they put on a safety belt.
But they're also battling perceptions that in the new South Africa, they're not quite black enough. It's a great opportunity to ask them to define the coloured identity.
I'm a colored. I call myself a colored because through the apartheid government, we were given that name, colored. My grandmother is Scottish, and my grandfather is a Zulu.
What is a colored? Because I can't see myself as a colored, because that identity was forced onto me.
Do you feel judged by what skin color you are?
Well, I went in 2015 for a job. They said I should come back. The second big manager didn't even look my way because I was a colored. He told the big manager that he's not taking people.
So you've been through you're not black enough, you're not white enough.
It was discouraging. I gave up for a year to look for work.
Do you think that communities like Westbury feel marginalized because they are predominantly colored people who live here?
Yeah. We feel like we maybe looked over most of the time here.
Asian Indians and Native Africans. Looking at a brief history of Africa, things were extremely segregated by law to maintain white supremacy. Africans were excluded from the political system until the 1980s. That's when things began to break down, and in 1994, once allowed to participate, Nelson Mandela would win the election and become president. Finally, the majority group is now in political power. The key issue we face today is now, how do we close the economic gap left behind in the wake of this apartheid system between blacks and whites that still remains today?
But for black South Africans, life in Cape Town is steeped in the lasting legacy of apartheid, the system of white minority rule that has left the country's black majority poor and powerless. Though apartheid was officially terminated in 1994, throughout South Africa, neighborhoods remain structurally segregated, and the vast majority of black citizens remain locked in grinding poverty. Cape Town's layout provides a striking example of the clear socioeconomic divisions between South Africans. I'm standing in a township that reflects the living conditions of most black Cape Townians. Poor and under-resourced, without access to running water, sewage, or even electricity. Just next to it is a white suburb that's worlds apart. From above, you can see the state of the bustling black township I'm standing in, called Imazamayetu. It's a barren, informal settlement made up mostly of shacks and government-built homes. Literally next to the township is a white suburb that's overflowing with greenery. So here's what life looks like for most white Cape Townians. Nice suburban homes with running water, protected by walls and alarm systems. Some even have signs specifically warning black Africans in their language of Xhosa of dogs inside. And the disparity isn't just black and white. Here's the colored township of Manenberg to the left, and the informal black settlement of Nyanga to the right.
Not far from the Engelbrecht farm near Fockville is the so-called informal settlement of Deep Sloot. It's a place of dire poverty and soaring unemployment.
This settlement has grown up so much because
it wouldn't be wise to venture in here without a guide. Local journalist Golden Mtika is mine. Lack of sanitation is the least of Deep Sloot's problems, Golden tells me. It's plagued by crime, violence and mob justice.
In November here, there was about 4 suspects who were apprehended by the community. They accused them of rape, and they brought them here at this pile of rubbish you see here. It was a multitude of people that were here. All of them, they were murdered here. They were killed by the residents, stoned, beaten by sharp objects. They put tires around their neck, they poured petrol, then they set them alight on. So they died here.
They were killed alive when
they
did that?
Yeah, when they brought them here, they were alive. Yeah, they killed them here.
Obviously, one of the major glaring differences between Africa and America is how the majority of the population is Black African, yet they are at the very bottom of the socioeconomic ladder. How, whereas in America, the vast majority of the population is 76% white, and, well, obviously we know the economic situation of Black minority groups. So it's just strange that in this situation, the majority is still essentially the oppressed and at the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder, despite them being 80% of the population.